You have made it to Stu and the Nunn, an online radio show that looks to inform, educate, and hopefully make you laugh. Stu and the Nunn is a show focused on national security, policy, politics, and selfless service. We do this by not only interviewing guests, but also sharing our own perspectives and asking you, the listener, to interact with us on our show chat room via our Facebook page and on Twitter. You have made it to Stu and the Nunn, an online radio show that looks to inform, educate, like to thank those who make this show possible and allow us to bring it to you. Our show sponsors are Commodity Outdoors, Veteran Outdoors, Enlisted 9 Fight Company, Warrior Media Solutions, and BooHammer.com. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode, July 30th, the last show of July, which means we are definitely over the hump of 2020, and I don't think the end could get here fast enough. Anyways, what's up? You can see I'm with my brother from another motherland, Toby the Nunn, here on my right, your left, I think. What's up, Toby, in the Southern Studio?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank our ones of listeners for surviving through that long bumper music. I feel like our intro gets longer and longer every day.
I got to edit it.
It allows people to know that we're live and to join us.
A lot of people are coming on. They're, the hundreds of numbers are rolling up. We're trying to get socials going. It buys us a little time.
It does.
I do need to shrink it a little bit. Our bumper opener music's a favorite of our guest tonight. He loves it. In fact, he loved making comments about it last time he was on.
It is his favorite.
Yes.
It is his favorite. Of all our bumpers, it's his favorite.
That's it.
But hey, how's everybody doing? We got a great show tonight.
We do.
We got our brother from another side of the state that you live in, or side of the city that you live in.
He's up here near the. He's near the northern studio. Yeah, he's up here.
Yeah, I mean he's basically like, down the street for you. But no, we got returning it. Stu and the Nunn, because he's surpassed the Steve Martin number of appearances on the show. But he's kind of a big deal to some.
He's kind of like the Ron Burgundy of the nation. He could walk around in a robe and his tidy whities.
He comes on the air, like the lamentations of the women of our enemies is just hard to handle. And everything smells like sweet mahogany.
Yeah, and he likes scotch.
Scotch.
Actually, he likes bourbon. I've turned him on to a new one too. I haven't asked him what he thinks of it since I left him a bottle last time I saw him. But anyways, so we're getting ready to bring him on. You may know him, you may have heard him. You could Google the name David Bellavia. I'm sure you'll get a hit or two, hopefully on reputable websites. And it's nice about having Dave on. When he's on, we get a lot of new listeners and viewers from places we don't normally get. I think they just kind of want to keep an eye on us. But anyways, it helps our numbers go up, so that's always appreciated. Anyways,
Yeah, no, and everyone loves when your fan base in ISIS grows.
mm-hmm.
You know, like
Or the federal government. It's good to know you turn on new people to watch the show.
or or the people watching ISIS. Yeah,
Yes, or people
but
watching ISIS.
without further ado,
If he can get him to flip his camera on, that would be great. And I don't want to
it'd be
bring on
cool
his.
if he did.
I don't
He's
want to
got
bring
great
on.
hair today. There he is.
Hey,
There he is.
how we
Look at that
doing?
hair.
There we go.
Look at that.
Can I
hair.
just say? Can I just say that if you love Stu and the Nun as much as I love Stu and the Nun, you really should support their sponsors because they're doing so much. They're all quality businesses. But how boohammer.com ends up crowbarring its way as to the people that are so important to this program is truly obnoxious. And he's like, and Procter and Gamble, and I'd like to thank the good people at Coca-Cola and boohammer.com.
That's right. Keeping it real. You always got to pay that
But
bill.
I was thinking how long it was that I met, that I was introduced to Toby, that I was introduced to Troy, and this is it's been a while since I've known you guys and we've been
A minute,
talking
yeah,
and
bro.
hanging out.
A minute.
No, I really do appreciate that relationship, especially as consistent as you've been with dignity and restoring that swagger that veterans. There was a lot of people that wanted to make us victims for a very long time, and you guys have really stood toe to toe with the whole. You never got sucked into the stolen valor thing. You never decided to chase the easy military blog traffic. You always stayed legitimate to veterans, and I really appreciate that from both of you.
Well, I appreciate that you saying that, and one of the reasons I appreciate you saying that, and this is actually because we're on this like hellacious group chat together. It's like the bane of my existence because apparently y'all don't work as much as I do because it drives me nuts how some people.
One of us doesn't work, is retired. He doesn't work at all, and
has the time to generate like meme after meme after meme, which are typically usually good, but out of that group of people, yeah, like I'm gonna bring up Jim Hansen, I'm gonna bring up Matt Burton, and that's actually how I got to meet you, Dave, is through them, through their affinity for you, and man, I gotta tell you, like when you see people stick together and you see people face adversity and you see people in the ups and the downs, like we've seen Matt low, we're seeing Matt back on the climb. We've seen Jim low, we've seen Jim high, we've seen Jim low, we've seen Jim like just slaying it right now.
I think we've all seen Jim high, by the way. That's
like,
I'm kidding.
I mean, like he likes to do the old sign off, but no, it is so neat to like have people in your life that regardless of the season, success or fail, joy and bliss or misery, that you can count on and you know are there and they're going to show up, and if they sit in the basement with you in the low, if they sit in the observation deck down on some beach in Florida with you on the high, like they're with you, and like that's actually what it's really about, and that's what makes this was just icing on the cake. The service was just icing on the cake. Now everyone gets like all hopped up about the service, and everyone's like, oh well, we got to do this and we were this, but like honestly, like when I look back and I think about it, I'm like, man, that was just a great benefit to meeting some of the best people on earth and meeting the worst, because to understand that you've met the best, you actually have to know what the worst is. And like, man, so I appreciate the friendship, I appreciate the brotherhood. Like nothing made me prouder, and we've probably talked about this, and finding out that they finally did what was right and upgraded what was deserving. I call it my dark period. I was at Hood back in the 90s. I had that mic identifier next to that one it's like, man, but I'm a Bravo. I'm a real infantry guy. And, like knowing that someone like me is, the other guys in our group chat would call us, did the nation proud, man. It's awesome, man. It's great. So love you, bro. And I appreciate you. And you're the only person I've ever met that can hype people up at my level.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I should actually start a hype firm.
You guys could have a business.
We should start a hype firm because you and I can hype some shit up.
I got a chance to hang out with General Funk, who runs TRADOC. And, I never, in my military experience, I never met a general. Occasionally General Batiste at the first ID would, show up at Christmas or Thanksgiving, but you don't really get a chance to see what it takes to get to that level of Army officer. I was just never in a talk. I never worked with officers that closely to really see what makes them tick. And I'm just fascinated by all the people that look at our military today, especially, and say, look at the negatives. Let's point out every single thing that, that isn't what it used to be. And then acknowledge that those 4-star generals and those 2-stars and those full bird colonels have spent every single day of their career at war. I mean, think about that. That is insanity. You've got forget I don't want to hear your 1850 stories about West Point. I don't want to hear, the generals that came out of, look at the Civil War and look at that class of West Point. Look at what the classes of West Point were pushing out in the 80s. Because every single one, I mean, we've got like four 4-star generals that are like from the same town in Boston.
Yeah. That are
really
leading, that are pretty much leading the Army, right? The number of them.
Leading the Army, that led the Marine Corps. So, I mean, it's really impressive when you see that is your senior leadership right now are people that have literally spent the majority of their career with troops in harm's way. And it's a completely different mindset than any other time in our military, where during the Cold War, we had a lot of folks that if you were around from Vietnam, that was the only game in town.
Dude,
right.
So you just brought up a command. You brought up TRADOC. Funk, that dude's a stud.
He absolutely, listen,
but his deputy,
absolutely.
His deputy, Martin, equally a stud. Last week, or I think it was last week, I think I even shared it on Facebook. The deputy TRADOC commander, Martin, I'm not sure if he goes by Theodore or Teddy, but Martin, like that dude sends like this message, and it's like, hey, if you're a soldier, like it doesn't matter, like, I'm paraphrasing, where you come from, like, because what really matters is like you're born in TRADOC, you're the future, and put all that other shit aside and get down to business. Like, I don't want to.
I'm telling you,
dude, and I was like big heart. I was like, that's the message that America needs to hear. That's the message America needs to hear.
General Paul Funk's legacy is going to be every single kid that's graduated from basic training, because I'm telling you, at least in the infantry, combat arms. I've been to Fort Jackson too, though, so I've seen the other MOSs. These young people they're firing more rounds than Troy probably did before he deployed. I'm not kidding you. It's not just basic rifle marksmanship. Let's learn some drill and ceremony.
No, it's a whole different animal.
These kids are putting rounds down range. They're doing, they're learning their 7-8. They know their fundamentals, but they're also getting, a training right now that I think all Americans need, which is just equal opportunity at the tip of the spear. If you have problems with other people, guess what? You're in this together, and you can have your prejudices and all your hatred, but that's not going to work in our team. It's not conducive to getting anything done. So, I've never been a proponent of the draft, but looking out in the streets of the United States, I think we won't deploy them, but we might just put them in and give them a haircut, because there needs to be a communal sense of why we're here.
Let me ask you, Dave, real quick. You have been, it's been 13 months, dude, almost to the day, just 13 and a couple days since you had that medal hung around your neck, and it's been a crazy journey. You and I have talked about it a number of times. And, you have went out and talked not only to the civilian populace, but you, like you just talked about, you've talking to everything from young officers about to become commissioned to basic trainees to drill sergeants to you name it. And obviously over the last several months of all the duress and strife and protest and, you know, everyone throwing the word racism around like it's air. I mean, are you seeing any reflections of that in your talks with the military? Is it still showing as the most diverse organization in the world, and also one that is not being distracted by that stuff and is focusing on their mission? Are you seeing any changes in that? Or,
You know, the one thing that I'm really proud of when I look at the Army today is that if a situation comes up that isn't within our standard, it seems that the average soldier and officer, at least NCOs that I've been around, they have an ability to handle things in a much better sense than I felt empowered as a staff sergeant. There are more tools and apparatuses for non-commissioned officers and junior officers to handle situations, and I think a lot of these problems are all local problems. You know, there's really no need to involve the brigade command if you have, you know, an ignorant soldier. When command is notified by an incident that occurs at that time, you know, to me it's an example of failed leadership across the board. And so the reasons why I don't think a lot of stories are coming out about the Army having a racial problem is because the Army doesn't have a racial problem. I mean, equal opportunity is something that you learn before you learn how to march. You learn how to respect people and show dignity and respect. It's not about mission success. It's about, this is our way of life. You know, you call strangers sir and ma'am. You don't differentiate between their sexuality or their skin color or their political party. They're sir or ma'am because they're civilians. And it's the same thing with any other creed and any other sexuality. So I'm just impressed by the ability for NCOs and for junior officers to basically say, you know, I know when I have a problem and I know what I can handle. And there's a lot of these kids that are just, you know, if they make a mistake, the action is corrected and they grow from it. And that's a sign, I think, of a great institution.
you bring up a good point, like when you said, I never thought of it, but you're right on. And that if a brigade command gets involved with some of that stuff, it is a failure of leaders. There's a lot of levels up to that brigade command. Any of those are more than capable, trained, and empowered to handle an issue without having to escalate it, right? Unless it's something so severe that requires that level, right? And everyone knows what that is. But some of these things, like we were talking about, would never warrant that. It would be handled in-house, probably at the platoon level.
Well, and what we see in our recruiting numbers is that, you know, the type of person that is going to have any sort of ideology that is not inclusive of different people are almost 180 degrees away from their effectiveness in uniform. I mean, that's not just a bad soldier, that's a bad person. And one of the things that we're recruiting is, you know, everyone's like, well, if this doesn't work out, try the Army. Maybe in the 70s that was the case. There's no judge saying go to war, go to jail anymore.
No, that was a cool cadence. That was it.
We turn people away left and right. This is, you have to be a good citizen. You have to be an honorable person to make it to even become recruited.
Kind of like the Canadian border. Me and Toby were just talking about that. Everyone always says they're running to Canada when they get mad. You can't just get into Canada. It's not that easy. You can't just get in the Army.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, the Army turns away a lot of people. It turns away a lot of people.
It is. Anytime someone like brings that up to me, like I'm quick to correct them and say, hey, well, you know, you might like look down on that line of work or that skill craft or that choice. Just understand that it's harder to join the military than it is to get into college. So if people are like, oh, well, so-and-so joined the military because they were out of options. Like, as soon as that conversation starts, I'm like, and you're full of shit. Like, you know, maybe he didn't want to be on the farm, but he had his shit together enough to get off of it. Like,
he was in good shape. He was good mentally. You know, he was good physically. You know,
or
she was right, or she
Yeah.
was. Oh, there's a lot of things, right? That's a good point, right? People think that's the last thing.
And if they're not good at any one of those things, they can always join the Air Force. That's how we work.
I knew it was coming. You didn't go Coast Guard yet. We'll get to that one later.
No. Just the Air Force. I love the Air Force. Right?
Yeah. But well, hey, I want to pivot on something else while we got you. You've done a lot of things, Dave. You've been very active at a lot of events and things that people know and don't know about, but including a number of careers. And you have created yourself a few times, and you kind of have a new thing coming up next week. You want to go into a little bit for our listeners and viewers and let them know what you got happening?
Yeah, I do this thing where I took the time I was in the Army and decided that as a civilian, I was going to just change course, you know, every 6 years, every 7 years, just change, you know, do something different and experience different things. And so the radio thing I've been doing for a very long time. I really started doing the blog talk stuff with you and just not even knowing you were a Buffalo guy at the time.
Yeah.
And when I had the opportunity to fill in, I would always bring you on, and it would always seem that when Troy would come in the studio, some horrible thing occurred in the world. And I'm not even joking. Like, there were 2 stories, local Western New York stories, that were just, you know, everyone talked about for 5 days. And the stories broke when Troy Stewart was sitting next to me and we were coming up with things that we were going to talk about. So he was almost like, you know, the curse for a little bit. But on Monday, I'll be starting a new program. It's on radio.com, and it's just the David Bellavia show, and it's going to be 9 to noon. And, you know, I've never apologized for the way I see the world. I identify as a conservative. I am a conservative, and I'm a Republican. But the radio station that I work for, it carries Rush, it carries Hannity, it's got Michael Savage, and the other host is, you know, pretty right of center as well. And so inevitably it becomes it sucks in nothing but one point of view. And the problem that I see in my community in Western New York, I see in the country, is that we can't have a discourse without it becoming emotional. Everyone is emotional and everyone takes everything personally. And so I'm committing to putting nothing but left-wing point of view on the radio station. I'm not there to ambush them. I'm not there to impress some stranger to think how smart I am. I'm not there to win a debate. I'm there to show people that you can talk about issues, you can have a back and forth, but you can leave with dignity and respect. So every one of my contentious, I'm going to argue abortion with someone. At the end, I'm going to ask them what they recommend on Netflix, because maybe they watch some good shows on Netflix. Yeah. It doesn't matter. So my whole thing is I want as awkward as a confrontation as we can have and show respect and just say, look, the next 4 years are going to suck no matter who wins the presidency, because the Republicans are coming for Biden and, you know, the Democrats are coming for Trump. So no matter what happens, we're going to have more of the same unless we as a society decide, you know what, there's bigger things, and they're the Chinese, and we have to worry about the Chinese. We can't be worried about race wars when there's
a real
war coming. And there's a lot of bad things that China has done, is doing, and will continue to do.
So this is starting on Monday, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern. It's on WBEN, which is a local station in Western New York, but it's carried. Anyone can hear it on radio.com, right? They just got to look up your name.
That's right, radio.com. You know, that really is, you know, you guys, when you started and you thought about your business model, it's really crazy to see how terrestrial radio has really come to you. In the old days, it was like, oh, you're not established until you have a terrestrial radio show. And now what we're seeing is that there's a revenue stream that has nothing to do with people that are listening to you live. It's I want to listen to Stu and the Nunn, and I want to do it on my time, on demand, while I'm jogging every single day. And that's, you know, the model that is really the future. So the radio.com app is the new syndication. You now can be listened to in every city, just like Stu and the Nunn can be listened to in every city on demand when people want them.
And I really want to highlight on something you just said in terms of dialogue. Early this morning, I was trying to get caught back up on some stuff, and I listened to, it wasn't a very long podcast. It was only, I want to say 30 or 35 minutes, but it was Ted Cruz and Eric Weinstein. And here are two like polar opposite politically, having just a great conversation, like actually discussing things, having dialogue, learning from each other. And like, that is what's necessary. That is what's lacking. A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I got invited to join Parler, and it's this new social media app. So I joined it, and I've been exploring on it, and I realized like all it is, it's the opposite of Facebook, right? So it's this super conservative echo chamber, where Facebook's like a super non-conservative echo chamber. And like, we don't accomplish anything. We don't grow as individuals, and we don't serve our community if we're not actually having constructive dialogue. And like, there's a statue. I'm like sitting in my office right now. There's a statue, I imagine 175 meters from me right now, that is highly contested in my county, that it was raised for all the wrong reasons, and people want to bring it down, and I understand why they want to bring it down, but it's a hot spot. But people can't have a civil discourse about it because, like you said, emotions just take place, and people just start screaming at each other, and that doesn't accomplish anything. Like, soon as anybody like starts screaming at me, all I think about is one of my kids having a tantrum, and I just like immediately I'm like, if you can't communicate your needs to me, I can't fulfill them. I got to teach you how to communicate your needs to me. Use your words. Like, I love saying that.
Use your inside voice. Use an inside voice too.
Those guys got scooped up in like that. Use your words.
There's a lot of truth to that. Look, I mean,
an unmarked rental vehicle. Enterprise, we'll pick you up. But
no, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. But I think one of the big problems that we're starting to see, the fight that we have in the United States is this existential fight of, is America flawed but has the potential to be great? Or is this just a failed experiment we need to start over? And if it is a failed experiment to start over, there needs to be accountability for the fact that the founding fathers who designed a document that we swear to, we don't swear to the president of the United States. We don't swear an oath to our flag. We don't swear an oath to our country. We swear to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States. Now, if you want to rewrite the Constitution of the United States, the founding fathers have given you a battle plan on how to do that. If you're going to do that by other means, violent means of terrorism, and there's also a part of that oath that talks about domestic enemies. And I just think that we're, maybe 2 steps away from having a dialogue that we had in 1859. And we have to avoid that, especially veterans. We have to avoid that at all costs. And that doesn't mean that we backpedal from our principles. That doesn't mean that we stop defending what we're doing. But just because you're sharing something on Facebook doesn't mean you're a part of the revolution. I mean, we laughed at Barack Obama because he was an organizer, a community organizer. What a joke. That community organizing has completely changed the way our country acts every single day. That wasn't something to be
100%.
laughed at. That is a very powerful tool. There is no community organizers on the right. What do? We share information on social media until we're not allowed to share information on social media. And then guess what? That's the extent of our sacrifice and our commitment. Look at these Maoists, Leninists, Marxists, whatever you want to call them. Look at these anarchists on the street and acknowledge that there is no movement like that on the right. A lot of people bemoan the state of America, But where is the passion? What we're missing in 2020 on the right is what we had in just hand over fist in 2016. There was motivation everywhere. The polls weren't looking all that great, but people, you knew that something was happening with Donald Trump. Something was happening with that movement. And right now with COVID, I mean, I don't care what anyone says about those polls. They're spot on. Those polls are spot on. If the election was held today, Joe Biden is the new president of the United States.
Yeah.
It's
but
just,
so I agree with you, except I don't think COVID is getting or deserves all the credit. The information campaign, the PR campaign that happened immediately following the election that planted the seed, you can't be discounted. Because now, one of the reasons why there's not the organization on the right-hand side that there should be to counter some of this is because they laid the table in such a way that if there ever becomes that, it is immediately a supremacist, like, they've got the moral high ground, right? So like they took the moral high ground on the thing so that if anyone organizes against them, well, they have to be a Nazi, they have to be a racist, they have to be white supremacist.
They've got the Southern Poverty Law Center spooled up, waiting for someone to pipe up, and they're immediately labeling them.
And no one's going to come at them at that way because they're not that person, and no one can politically survive that kind of assault. Like they really neutered, for lack of a better term, they took away the ability to fight. Like they handcuff. Maybe that's a better.
But isn't that what leading? I'm kind of ask David this. I kind of feel like that's what's leading us to be 2 steps away, right? It's this undertow, right? People are getting the right may not be loud and boisterous, but there's the patience is running thin, right? I don't think there's. I think they're just not being loud.
But I mean, look,
but the sad part is like when you push someone to that level, like it's all or nothing. And man, how many people don't want to be part of that all? Like how many people? Like I'm not a racist.
But see, that's the other thing too, is that one of the things that when I hear people my age, our age, talk about young people, we can't, forget that those are our children. I mean, that's true. If there's a generation of parent that deserves the blame for the fact that you have kids out there screaming about equal rights and don't know Plessy versus Ferguson, and they don't have any idea what Brown versus the Board of Education was or the Dred Scott decision. They have no concept of Juneteenth. What Juneteenth actually represented was the anniversary, the last African American freed from slavery. And then you had African Americans assemble in towns and lay flowers on Union graves. And then you had children and townsfolk singing the national anthem, singing the battle hymn of the Republic. That's not at all what's brought into today's modern retelling. It's this Howard Zinn filter of America is institutionally bad. And again, one of the things that I want to educate people on is that, the big misnomer about, where Andrew Jackson had a decision to make when he decided to try to make America an empire that could compete with England and France and the rest of the world. And it was a party platform of the Democratic Party to expand within their own borders. And that meant if you were a native living on land, you were going to leave that land. And if you stayed on that land, you would be enslaved on that land. And if you resisted, you would be killed. Now, we take a juxtaposition by all the stories we're hearing about all of these different folks that made horrible decisions, Bragg and Benning and all the different Confederate generals. I just want to remind my friends on the left that not all secessionists were Democrats, but all Confederates were Democrats. And the last time the Democratic Party contested a Republican that they didn't want to be president, they bombed Fort Sumter. There was no Confederate flag then. That was the Democrat Party that did that. So we've seen this before, where mayors and governors work autonomously from the federal government. We've seen this before. We've seen chops and chaz before in the United States. They were happening in South Carolina. They were happening in Virginia. They were happening in the South. And that was a political party that decided they were going to control the future of the United States without any federal intrusion. So I'm just saying that we've seen this before, and yet we're selective about the memory that outrages us. And yet, if we're going to be a cancel culture next to the Washington Redskins, I would cancel the name Democrat Party because of the years of I mean, they removed racist language in their national platform in 1968. We're not talking 1870,
right?
1968. So that information is not out there, and we're just piling onto an unpopular guy because he tweets, and we don't like his attitude, and we don't like his tanning, and we hate him as a man. But we are just absolutely jumping around and picking and choosing what part of history we want to remember.
Well, that's part of the narrative, right? To push a narrative, you have to selectively use what you can and spin those words and maybe not add the context in so it looks bad, because a lot of it, we've heard a lot of time, it's all about the context, right? You heard it the other day when Barr was in front of that horrible appearance of that committee, who just was 100%. You couldn't be more unprofessional than you could that House Judiciary Committee. And I mean, they continued to ask him questions and would not give him a chance to explain. And he kept trying to say, if you look at the context, if you talk, and they wouldn't even go there, right? It was just yes or no. Okay, I got your answer, and I'm going to use my 5 minutes to just berate you and move on, right?
Reclaim my time.
Yeah. It's all about context. So when you take it out of context, it's like when you take the snippet and someone just takes that little bit of audio and it's part of a bigger sentence. That's all they play. You know, they could do it to this show 100 times. We've said things that if you only took a second, it would sound real.
You for sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm telling you, I think we need national service now more than we ever have in our nation's history. I really believe the future of now, you don't have to deploy to combat. I only want people in the active Army and Marine Corps that want to be there. But there is nothing wrong with learning to work together with people that you disagree with, that look different than you, and get yourself out of this comfortable, mode. I mean,
it's a Starship Troopers model, right? Starship Troopers. You got to do your service.
Citizenship.
You earn your citizenship.
Yeah, like that. So true story. Like that chapter of that book. I read that. I guess I was probably 13 or 14 when I read Heinlein's Starship Troopers, and man, like that influenced me in such a way that when I came to this country and I realized how awesome this country was, like I knew that service is what I needed to do.
Oh.
And like, do we lose him?
We lost Dave's video. I don't know if he's still there. Oh, Dave, you there?
Like, that's such an important thing for people to understand. I love, I'm going to bring up some of the Scandinavian countries on their service plan. And on their service plan, like everybody serves in a certain capacity. I'm speaking specifically of Sweden. And the neat part is like, so you serve the nation in some capacity as a Swede. And then if you want to do something externally on behalf of the nation, then, you apply and there's a selection process and, it's meritocracy. They take the best person for the job. And it was neat because, we had this Swedish unit attached to these, like every person that they had on their forces, they were peacekeepers with us, was the best at what they did. Their medics were doctors. Their like riflemen were like the best riflemen that the country had. They were like Olympic biathlete. It was like, but everybody served. If you wanted to do more than that, then you applied. and I love that. You know, Troy, you and I both were stationed in Korea. You know, the service there, it's an important part, and like that's why I felt to earn my right to be in the United States or to remain in the United States was through service, and uh, it
I mean,
breaks my heart sometimes when people don't understand the value and how awesome they actually have it. You know, coming to the United States sucks. Like when you look at immigration numbers, and I'm talking global immigration numbers, people don't go to countries that suck. Man, like let Iran, just throwing it out there. You know, people aren't beating down the Iraqi Iranian border to get into Iran because it's so bad where they're at that they want to go somewhere that's so awesome. Like people are coming to North America, primarily America, because it is so good. You know, like not to diss, you know, like my homeland, my citizenship or anything like that. But if you had a bunch of refugees and you put the opportunity in front of them, they're like, you could go to Canada, you could go to America, or you could go to Mexico. People would be like, first choice their choice chance of getting into America, their choice Canada. Canada's a great country. You know, like people like they have no idea how good they have it. And like you said, it's because of a document. It's because of the foresight, you know, of a document that people have no idea. Like this whole peaceful protest, like you have the ability to like cuss out a cop in America under your First Amendment right. Like try that anywhere. Try that in Germany.
But to me, what's fraudulent about the argument is that everything we do right now, what are you thinking about the year 2350? Nobody. It's maybe if you're mentally ill, you're worried about the year 2350, what your lineage will think of you. Our grandparents and our great-great-grandparents didn't care about what was going to happen to us. They cared about eating. They cared about living. They cared about their children. They cared about having a tomorrow. And we're expecting Thomas Jefferson. You are looking at 1776 Thomas Jefferson. He understood slavery. He owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson knew that there was a tremendous amount of duplicity that was going on when he was writing the Declaration of Independence. Of course he did. But he did what politicians are doing today with immigration and with all the different reforms. They kicked the can down the road. The founding fathers said, we'll deal with slavery in the next generation.
Yeah.
And the next generation certainly had to deal with it. They kicked it down the road too. And so finally it fomented into bloodshed. And then women were like, when do we get to vote? And it's like, well, first we got to fix the slavery issue. And we'll push women's rights off down the road until, you know, every generation has to have one seismic shift. But that was, the founding fathers knew exactly what they were doing. That wasn't a proud moment. They knew that they failed. They lost the debate. Now, New York was hard enough to talk into fighting to begin with. But what they chose, the hill they chose to die on, was to, again, keep slavery in the South for the sake of the economy. Right. And if you want to question how important these rights were, what did they do between the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution? I mean, Shays' Rebellion was really the first American Civil War. It was a guy who basically said, this governor is treating me like a king. I have no rights. And the federal government didn't have a right to have an army. It didn't have the right to impose a tax. It didn't have the right to print currency. So Shay decided, and his little friends and cohorts decided to go after the Massachusetts state. And what did John Adams do? They had to bring back George Washington out of retirement to go handle this, because the only thing the colonists would respect were the warrior class, were the veterans, because they actually had a compass and they stood for something. And I'm saying now in American history is when veterans have to stand up and say, listen, you don't know what you want, Antifa. You have no idea what you're poking the bear in Portland and Seattle. We don't want bloodshed here. And if you think that your cause is so important that it's worthy of your life, my children's life, we're going to push back. Let's avoid that at all costs. But let's maybe get a lesson that mom and dad didn't teach us about listening. You've aired your grievances. Now it's your turn to listen to the rest of the country, and let's start conducting ourselves like adults.
But we've breeded a society that doesn't, right? That they don't want to listen. They want it their way, or they think this is fun. They don't realize that they're fun, or hey, let's go downtown and riot and do this. What it's contributing to the greater hysteria, right? They think they're isolated, and they're just going to go yell in a cop's face or do something or throw a Molotov cocktail. What that means on the global stage, they don't want to listen. Right? They're not trying. Some of the cops we saw tried to listen. There were cops, NYPD cops, that took a knee, that did this, that did that, and then they still get their heads smacked in. Right? It's like, okay, well, that didn't work too well.
You know, the whole flag. You know, everyone. The polling's gone the opposite way. Pro Kaepernick, the NFL, Major League Baseball, all this. You know, but the argument, if you want to just see intellectually what you're up against, right? The Confederate flag has so much meaning to it that when it's hung at a rally, it's emblematic of something that is hurtful to a large percentage of our population. Whether it's treason or whether it's bigotry, the flag has so much power that it cannot be sold and it cannot be shown anywhere in public because what it represents is powerful. And yet the American flag has no meaning whatsoever. It doesn't matter who it offends. It doesn't stand for anything. Well, which one is it? Do flags represent things or do they not? And if the Confederate flag is so insulting that it can't be shown, surely the American flag should be so respected that it's not kneeled at or burned, or like our national, women's soccer team walk off. I don't know if it was a women's national team that walked off during the anthem. You're representing America, and you should be suspended if you walked off during the Chinese anthem. That's disrespectful to them. That's not how we act.
Yeah.
Try not to stand at attention when another country's flag is passing you in NATO. Be disrespectful to an ally and see what happens to you in the military. It's unacceptable. But yet our own flag is treated like that. Why? Well, to me, it's just a matter of dissecting these arguments and saying, look, you don't live your life like that. You don't want to be cruel. Your whole argument is about cruelty and how much things hurt.
Right.
So stop hurting institutions because you're hurt. It's a conversation you usually have at 6 years old.
Right. Well, it's the whole thing of the coexist, right? The people with it's always the vehicles with the coexist stickers that don't want to coexist with anybody, right? The people that speak tolerance and talk about acceptance and tolerance, no matter what color and who you love and everything else and all that stuff. Yet, if you're don't think the way they do, they're absolutely intolerant of you. They can't sit down and have that civil discourse and that civil conversation, right? It's my way or the highway. And that's what's missing from one side versus the other. We've seen a number of experiments where someone will walk up. There was one back during the 2016 election cycle where someone purposely had someone at a Hillary event walk up with a Trump hat that said, "Hey, I lost my puppy," blah blah blah, and people were and they just video it to kind of get an idea of how people acted and how hateful they acted at the person. And then they did the same with the Trump line of people to go to a Trump rally, and someone walked up to Hillary and they're like, "I lost my puppy dog, can you help me find it?" And people were like, "Sure, let's help you find it." It was just, you see this dichotomy of just, and it's not representative of the candidate, but it's a representative of the mindset of just like, can you just, we don't care about who you're voting for, what you're wearing or whatever. It's like, you're in distress. Let me help you. Like, I don't want a puppy to be lost, or you can't find your kid or something like that. You shouldn't start yelling and screaming at people. And until you get past that, man, we're going to be one step closer instead of two, Dave, like you think we are.
There's a new civil right that is about 8 years away from taking hold in the United States. And I'm afraid that conservatives like Susan B. Anthony are never going to see, Susan B. Anthony in her lifetime never saw women's suffrage. And she dedicated her life to the Republican Party. She dedicated her life to abolition. She did everything the party asked her to do. And when the 14th and 15th Amendments were passed, They were just hoping to have language in there that men and women could vote, men and women could have property, men and women were citizens. But she never saw that in her lifetime. And I'm fearing that as we look at the next existential fight, it's going to be about the civil right of the equality, the point of view equality, that you have to hire people that think different than you. We've already seen it with ethnicity. Of course, the civil rights era was based on that. And then you had sexuality and sexual orientation. I really believe that if you're not allowing different points of view in your workplace, at your federal jobs, at your schools, and at your newspapers, it's the equivalent of not hiring a minority. It's the equivalent of not hiring someone who loves different than you,
has a disability, whatever.
That's what it's come down to. You can't allow platforms to unilaterally handcuff people that are sharing ideas. What is threatening about the idea? I mean, this is what Larry Flint dedicated his life to. I mean, if this was a pornography debate, there wouldn't be one liberal that wouldn't be like, wait, why can't these guys do whatever they want? So you can show repugnant beheading videos on Twitter as ISIS, but you can't share a doctor having a press conference, regardless of the information they put out. Right?
Well, I mean, like Congressman Jim Jordan, just kind of went at the CEO of Google recently because the Ayatollah of Iran said that basically, I'm paraphrasing, bless Soleimani's soul, we will seek retribution on the Americans for his death. And that tweet's allowed to go. And then the president of the United States tweeted something about law and order and censored.
Right.
So I think you're right. The only caveat that I would throw in there, though, is, and I do think that it's a matter of time. I have like the over under on our calling rains and tropical storms and typhoons by people's names because it's that's a microaggression. But the only thing that I think will hold back the political diversity, as you're saying, in the workplace, is because of the power of the tech industry. And the power of the tech industry, they don't want diversity of politics. In fact,
you're right, but
so
realize,
I think that is the only thing that is stopping it. This whole you didn't make me a cake, you didn't do this for me,
right?
How dare you?
Here's
I
the
can't be discriminated against.
But here's the difference in the post-Trump world is that you have 320 new federal judges that have been appointed by this administration. The revolution will be televised, but it's going to be on court TV because that is how the left has moved their agenda, and the right is going to move their agenda in the courts in front of these judges who are now going to hear cases. Why are there no gun cases in front of the Supreme Court? Well, because no one is hearing gun cases at the circuit level. No one's suing. So, I mean, what are you going to possibly do? Is it an unconstitutional law if no one brings it up in court? I mean, existentially, you can make the argument, of course it is, but we still have laws on the book that are unconstitutional.
Right.
Well, I'd say I live in Austin, and I really thought for sure we would be having a hard gun debate following last weekend, but there's nothing there. I'm laughing, and I shouldn't laugh because someone lost their life, but I'm laughing not because someone lost their life. I'm laughing at the irony of how all these organizations like open carry, they hate guns, they hate, they're like all these things. You shouldn't have these guns. You don't need these guns. But then all of a sudden these guns are in a protest for you to bully and intimidate. And then you point a gun at just a random person's vehicle because
what
and
you're
you get
saying,
gunned down, and then
listen,
another bug guy shoots into the vehicle in the crowd, and they're like, "There's no arrests." Well, like you brought a gun to a gunfight and you lost.
The Constitution, right? The founding fathers gave us the Second Amendment to do precisely what these people are angry about the government and intend to do. That's why the Second Amendment is there. So let's not. What we're seeing is not un-American. The idea that I won't tolerate this anymore. I'm not waiting for a generation to give me what is due to me. But in those circumstances, you're able to articulate what you want. And what you're seeing being articulated by Black Lives Matter and other leftist groups are things that the liberal Democrat Party has been talking about for 30 years. The LA Board of Education is talking about defunding the police. That's not, what are you doing? What? This is now the talking point. So as we go to the chop and the chaz world, that is what you saw with the Shays Rebellion. The difference was you were raping, murdering, extorting, and stealing and breaking property.
Stealing people's food, and their vegan food.
That's where law enforcement.
Oh, and what was the enforcement arm of the Chaz or Chop? It was
dudes with guns.
I'm forgetting the leader's name, but
the rapper guy
walked around with guns, and we're the police now, and that was just straight up like warlords, right? Like that was like some Somali pirate. I'm the captain now.
Listen, and then the situation has presented itself where federal intervention is considered to be an invasion. But if you really look, I mean, first of all, you have DEA agents working in Portland right now. You have DHS agents in Portland every single day right now. They're allowed to be there through Portland, through Oregon. Mm-hmm. The federal government works in Portland. Of course it does. Of course it facilitates the Portland police on drug calls and felony arrests, and the U.S. Marshals are there. I mean, you're adding more forces to protect a federal courthouse, and how that whole situation just got hijacked. It just shows that this is a long fight. And the reason why we have an 8-year struggle to get back to normalcy in America is because we have been complacent for 40 years. And, maybe the lazy generation wasn't the Generation Xers. Maybe the lazy generation were conservative baby boomers, because they haven't done a damn thing. They haven't done anything to protect, the ideology for another generation. And these neocons, all the left said neocons are cowards. Turns out, Troy, neocons are cowards. Who knew, huh? You got Bush, you got Cheney, you've got Rumsfeld, all these generals coming out of the woodwork and endorsing. Again, I'm a recovering neocon. And I'm learning.
I wanted to touch on that. I know we don't have a ton of time, but wanted to touch and get your views on that. You're in the political sphere because you've been in the political sphere. How are you responding? How are you taking in someone that's not in the political sphere, diving into it? We saw it in the previous administration with McChrystal and Petraeus, both not very good attempts to jump into the political foray. But in this administration, and most recently, we've seen it with Mattis. We saw it with everyone's beloved hero, Mattis, who could do no wrong, like jump in the political foray. And it's like, it's interesting. Like, what are your thoughts on ex-military leaders of high level jumping in the fray? Because we haven't seen anyone successfully do it since Eisenhower.
Well, I mean, first of all, Colin Powell hasn't voted for Republicans since H.W. Bush. I mean, this was a guy that I should say W. Bush. He didn't vote for McCain. He didn't vote for Romney. So him not voting for Trump, General Mattis is the greatest general for people that judge the greatest general by memes. You know what I mean? The swagger of General Mattis. No, but it's the truth.
He's the meme general for
There's
sure.
nothing General Mattis did on the ground that was at all at a level of when you look at what Petraeus was working with and what Petraeus made, you look at what Stanley McChrystal had to work with.
Mattis was inferior to their accomplishments.
I'm very impressed with General Allen. General Mattis is a motivator. He's a warrior. He's extremely intelligent. He's well-rounded. He's a wonderful ambassador for the military. But he has never once pretended to be a Republican or a conservative. The way General Mattis looks at issues is not the same way that a majority of conservatives identify. So the idea that General Mattis is not a hardcore conservative, no one's shocked by that. He was talking about gays in the military 12 years before anyone was talking about reversing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He was a very progressive general.
It was on his watch.
And all of these other, and I'm not judging him by that. I have a deep respect for General Mattis as a man, as a general. I'm just saying, this isn't a shock. These guys were never Republicans to begin with. And somehow the Iraq war just warped the entire debate, where if you supported troops at war, you were somehow a far-right lunatic. And because Mattis was kicking butt and putting scalps on his mantle, everyone thought Stanley McChrystal and General Mattis are just incredible right-wing ideologues. Can't wait to run them for office. You don't want Stanley McChrystal. If you're a conservative, Stanley McChrystal is a Dem. He's a Democrat. God bless him. It turns out Democrats can
like
fight.
Petraeus, registered.
Yeah. But again, to me, it speaks about our army and our military that Democrats can kick your ass too. And there are Democrats, there are Americans fighting together. But just because you're a military guy or a gun owner, that doesn't mean that you voted for Trump, and it doesn't mean you support Trump. I'm just shocked that former Republican presidents are coming out and saying that, Joe Biden is, the answer for the country. Joe Biden convinced people to go to war in Iraq. And then Joe Biden in 2006 was talking about defunding the war, meaning the gas you have in your tank is the only gas you're going to get. It's not cutting the defense budget. He was talking about defunding the war. That is a period of growth for any elected official. The very thing African Americans are in the streets yelling about is the 1994 crime bill that he passed.
That Joe Biden passed, that he pushed.
So Democrats are in the same spot that Republicans were in 2012 when we were trying to fight Obamacare, and our candidate wrote Obamacare in Massachusetts. And we're like, we can't even have an Obamacare debate because Romney wrote Obamacare. And we're shocked when Mitt Romney is like, I'll do my own thing. Will you now? That started a long time ago, sir. He's been doing his own thing forever. We're finding out who real conservatives are and who aren't. And you're opening up for the potential of a far left party to open, or a conservative Republican party to become a third party in the United States, because there's too many factions in what you have now.
I think it's a good point. There is an opportunity for a far left, even though much of the left seems to be trying to pull to far left to embrace and get as much in. I mean, look at what we've seen Joe Biden and many others of the candidates before him that were running. We're all looking at AOC and all that kind of whole squad as, the big Green New Deal is this, as like they had a horn sticking out of their head, to now they're embracing them, right? What did Biden say last week? I'll be the most progressive president this country's ever had.
Like Dave touched on it earlier, when he talked about Benning and, all these leaders, and now, there's the big movement, to change all the names of the bases and all that stuff. But like, who is it? Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert stood on the floor of Congress the other day and just said, like, hey, if you're gonna erase all these people from history, you just need to erase the Democratic Party name.
But again, But listen, there's a lie that has been told for many, many generations now that African Americans that were Republicans, every African American in your city was elected as a Republican. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Women's suffrage was a Republican issue. The Sierra Club was created by Teddy Roosevelt. Conservation was a Republican issue. Child labor laws, breaking up the monopolies. These were Republican issues. They were a progressive party. And what happened was Herbert Hoover and the FDR shows up during the Depression, and you saw overwhelming African Americans changing their registration from Republican to Democrat. It had nothing to do with the Civil Rights Act. And in fact, African Americans became Democrats at times in the South where they couldn't even vote without a literacy tax, or a test, without a poll tax. All the Jim Crow laws were being pushed by the Democrat Party in the South as African Americans were changing party affiliation because it was about the economy and the Depression.
They needed a job.
Everyone did.
Right.
Everyone needed a job. Everyone was struggling. A lot of Republicans moved to Democrats, the Democrat Party there. What's ironic is that the Southern racist Democrat pre-FDR died as a Democrat. The Southern racist Democrat never became a Republican. The Southern Democrats that moved over to the Republican Party en masse after FDR came with the Reagan Revolution, when Reagan took all of those Democrats with him. And then George H.W. Bush promptly lost them to Bill Clinton. And, now you had the 2016 election where those disenfranchised Democrats came home. A lot of people in unions voted for Donald Trump. It's just the way it is. So right now, if we're going to understand our history, the Democrat and Margaret Sanger, don't quote Margaret Sanger. Read her book. Her book is the most you want to talk about Henry Ford and Charles Lindbergh? They had repugnant views on the Jewish people. But Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford didn't want the Germans to invade America. They were warped in their ideology and wicked in their view of other people. But they were Americans who had disturbing views on other ethnicities and religions. Margaret Sanger was talking about killing black people to evolve the population.
And it took last week before they started removing her from everything about Planned Parenthood. Just last week.
Like recently.
No, but that's a horrible human being. It's a horrible human being, and it's a person that should not ever be emulated. I mean, if you're going to be up in arms about people naming their football team a derogatory name, you have to be up in arms about an institution that still celebrates a woman who believed and supported eugenics. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Eugenics.
Yeah. Murder people.
Yeah.
And yet we're going to, because of their skin color, because of their ethnicity. It's absolutely repugnant. It's un-American. And it just shows you will put your blinders on and bow before the one you serve. And,
they do other things.
The NBA is talking about Black Lives Matter, but we don't want to discuss anything happening in China. When the Hong Kong protesters are being murdered in the streets,
and people wore free Hong Kong into the stadium, and they got thrown out.
Don't mention what's happening with the Uyghurs or with Hong Kong in the NBA, but we could talk about all the issues here because, of course, we're free. Let's complain.
Yeah.
So
I just want to say, for those tuning in, if you didn't know, this is not a history professor, even though I think he could be. And Dave, you may want to include that in your show. You may want to do like an hour of a week just talking about history, because he's
a playrite.
You educated the crap out of me. I thought you were just a theater major, but obviously you were a history major.
Playwright.
Pre-med.
But
anyway, hey guys, I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me on so long. I love your show. Go Stu and the Nunn, download it, watch it as many times as you can. These guys are really, really good at what they do. They're super focused, and you guys should have 3 times the following.
We should. Well, you always help that because, as Toby said at the beginning, you are the best hype man. I love when I'm on air with you. You give us so many kudos and talk us up that if anyone had never heard of us before, they're probably in their car when they're listening going, how in the hell have I never found this show? This sounds like the greatest thing ever.
It's a great show. It's a great show, and you guys do a great job. I love you both. Thank you so much for all your kindness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
And we're going to go get a Fuzzy Wuzzy. So
Hey, I'd love that. I'd
October.
Love that. Yeah.
That's it.
Start thinking.
My friend Knapp, my buddy.
Yeah,
from,
Chuck.
He's a hunter.
Yep.
He takes some big old Missouri deer with him. So
Yeah.
Well,
stud.
we're
All
gonna
right.
go get a fuzzy wuzzy.
I appreciate that. You guys take care.
All right, take it easy, buddy. Have a good one.
All right.
Okay, everybody, there you go. I'm going to do some video switching. Let me see here. I got some.
No, well, I'm excited he's getting back on the air, man. Like, I always, that's one of the things that I think is so neat is you got this guy that, served, cares about his community, involved in his community, gets on the air and does what he can to talk to his community and really engage in his community. And then that guy ends up being, I love those like memes that are made of him, like Dave from IT.
Oh, that's the best. Yeah.
The moment you find out that Dave from IT
killed 5 dudes in a house.
Stabbed a dude.
Yeah.
It couldn't happen. It couldn't. The pressure and the weight of what that is couldn't be rested on shoulders that are better deserving and more prepared for it than Dave. And so I love it. And
more prepared for it, dude. You couldn't have hit it. I mean, a lot of people don't see the what's that, the old show Behind the Music. There's a lot of behind the music with a lot of these guys that have gotten a Medal of Honor hung on them that have survived. Dave has enlightened me to a number of those, and a number of those.
The dude's an absolute stud.
Yeah, he handles it. Some of them are not. It's instant fame, and you go from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour as soon as that thing gets hung on, and it's hard for anyone to handle that kind of stuff. And Dave has handled it with grace and maturity, and there's no doubt, his age helps in that. And I told him, I mean, everyone watches his speech from the Pentagon ceremony. That thing is, it's in rap videos now. It's like in all kind of stuff, and it's a direct, it's a direct relation to his time on the air, to time talking to people and speaking and that kind of stuff. Because back in the day,
I'm glad he's getting back on it.
What's that?
I'm glad he's getting back on it, man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's where he needs to be, and I think that's where we as a country need him. And he comes at things a very level push, and we need more of that. So I'm glad. I'm really glad he's going back to that, because I thought we potentially could have lost his voice forever just due to not wanting to be.
I didn't think. I mean,
subject to that.
He's got a lot going on, and he got so busy right after he had it. I just thought for sure he was never coming back on the radio, and definitely never coming back in Western New York radio. And he's gotten a nationwide following. Had it before, but even more so now. And I just let him know he educated me tonight. I did not know he was such a student of history. I mean, he was dropping stuff, and I was sitting there going, "Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, that was that name." I mean, it was just. He's on top of it. And if you ever watch his speeches, and I know you've seen him, Toby, we've shared and put him on our page, whether he's talking at getting a key to a city, or it's at the Pentagon, or he's at the stock market, or a class of drill sergeants graduating, he has no teleprompter.
Some random units ball.
Yeah. He has no teleprompter. Yeah. He has no cue cards. He has nothing. That dude talks from the heart and off the top of his head every single time. He does not need anyone to have him script it for him. Sometimes he has jokes that fall flat. I think they're hilarious. Some people are offended, but it's a real day. And I tell people all the time, they know, like you and I were close to him, and they ask me what he's like, and I'm like, you see what you get. Like, he's not putting up much of a front. He's a pretty. I mean, he may talk a little bit rougher when it's just you and him, and that kind of stuff. But people do that but the
message is the same.
Yeah. Yeah,
the vocabulary might be different. The message is always consistent.
But the vocabulary is understood, that's for sure. So, but yeah, it was great having him on. As you said, he's been on more than anybody. He's been a guest host here a number of times. I think he's Mike Simpson's probably only second behind Dave as far as number of times guest hosting. And Mike was saying Bellavia
you know,
2024 tonight.
Mike's trying to be Dave's running mate in 24.
I see that. That would be a hell of a ticket.
That's one hell of a ticket.
Yeah. But anyways, no, it was a great show. Thanks for Dave coming on. And, I'm excited about his show starting up next week. I'll be doing my best to listen in while I work every day, but I know 9 to 12, I'm going to be looking for any open slots and just tuning in and listening to what he has to say. He's giving me a little insight to in his show. It's definitely going to be different than what most people have heard or are used to. And I think that's what we need. We need something different. And it's great to hear how he said he's bringing in voices and opinions from the other side, right? Not to have an echo chamber, but to have civil, open dialogue. If you change someone's mind, great. If anything else, at least someone can listen without the screaming that you talked about and hear two different opinions. And maybe it'll make a third party, someone listening, just to make a better decision besides what Fox or MSNBC is telling them to say all the time, right?
No, I'm such a fan of that. Now I'm not really impressed by Steven Crowder, but I love his approach to hey, let's talk about it. Change my mind. And, the fact that Dave's doing that, I absolutely love it. It reminds me of the old Hannity and Combs days. But great show, man. Love having him on. And it makes me feel special, to think back to who we have in our lives as our friends and, where we started. I think I shared something the other day. I was like,
you did. Yeah.
And it was like, man, we've been doing this a minute, brother.
Yeah.
A minute.
Well, most people forget we had Top Talk, right? And then we took a break, and then I think we took a break.
You served
Top Talk, and then
took a break,
and then Stu and the Nunn. Yeah, and it took us. I remember that, man. People don't know. I think we did a phone call one day, and we're like, hey, been a while. What do you think about getting a show back together again? We had a little break, had to take care of some things, and then we jumped in at both feet, right, and said, we need a website. We needed this. What are we going to call it? We need graphics. And we were just like, before we knew it, I remember when we had all that done, we didn't expect to be up for a couple of months. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, we're ready to start hosting. Like everything just came together. And 213 episodes.
I shaved my head and we got back to it.
That's it. 213 episodes later. On this show, at least, a lot more than that. So yeah, I've been doing this about 13 years. We've been tracking on doing this show stuff.
How about that? About that?
And I didn't tell Dave. This is a little fun fact, Toby. When I first got into doing this, it was obviously C.J. Grisham was doing it at USERV by himself, and he had me guest host his show with him or fill in or something. I was on the show with him, and Dave was the guest. That was the first time I'd ever met Dave. So actually, the first time I met Dave was I knew of him from our circles, but I never met him, was having him on a guest on that show, on that podcast, when I was just asked to come on and just be a second voice for someone that was just by themselves. And look where we are now. So, and Dave going off doing his own thing. So good dude. Thank you for everyone. Thanks for Dave for coming on and giving us a lot of his Thursday night. Toby, good to see your brother down in the Southern studio. And Stu here from the Northern studio at a cool 76 degrees. Don't know what it is down there.
Glorious.
Yeah, I bet it does for you. But hope you have a good night. Hope everyone else has a good night. Toby, you have a good one. Anything else from you?
That's it.
All right,
That's
buddy.
all I got.
Stay safe, everybody. Keep an eye on. Be civil. Have open conversation. Don't be closed-minded, and love your neighbor and love your fellow citizens. Everyone, you have a good night. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Stu and the Nunn Show, and we hope you had as much fun listening to it as we did hosting it for you. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. You can find all these links at stewandthenunn.com. We will talk to you again next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Commodity Outdoors, Veteran Outdoors, Enlisted 9 Fight Company, Warrior Media Solutions, and BooHammer.com. Thank you again, and have a good night.